our daughter Petra was born, we couldn't be happier. We already had a son, and now we have this daughter, and it was really, really happy. We were told Petra had a heart murmur when she was born, and I didn't think anything of it. It wasn't a very big deal. Turns out she had a little lesion on her heart, which caused her EKGs to not be normal but acceptable. But then 4 years later, after monitoring her heart, it turned out it was a very big deal. That little lesion turned out to be a tumor on her heart, a fibrous tumor, but it was pressing on her heart and it was causing a life-threatening arrhythmia. So essentially, my happy, healthy 4-year-old daughter had a time bomb inside of her chest, and it had to be removed, and it had to be removed quickly. We went to New-York-Presbyterian Hospital, and we were assured by Dr. Q, his name is Quaggerbar, that everything was going to be okay and that this was going to be done, but it had to be done. There wasn't any choice. There wasn't medication, and your life kind of stops. My daughter had to stop going to school. I had to stop going to work. My husband had to go off to work every day and didn't know what he was going to come home to. And he stopped sleeping at night because you're constantly checking on your daughter to make sure that she's still breathing. At one point, I just had her sleeping in the bed with us because I was afraid to leave her alone. And we're talking about a child who's nonstop, and now I've got to stop her from doing everything. And I've got a son who I can't do anything for either, because everything has to suddenly revolve around doctor's appointments. I mean, from being fine one day to literally everything changes. Everything just stops. So I went to the hospital to have her surgery done. I went to New-York-Presbyterian, and handing her over was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life, is putting your child in someone else's hands and make sure that they come back to you. And she did come back to us, and she came back fine. They took her tumor out. This was supposed to be the size of an acorn, and it was the size of a golf ball. And she calls it her creepy meatball. They took it off of her heart, and then they took muscle, and they built it around her heart to strengthen it. And she came out, and she was okay, and she was angry. She went from feeling really fine to what happened. And within 2 days, my daughter left the ICU and went down to a regular floor. And it was at that point that we saw a lot of nurses who cared for us and the social workers who took care of us emotionally too. We have a son who didn't understand, why can't you come home? You took her tumor out. Why isn't she home yet? So he got to come to the hospital, and he got to meet some really great people in a room just for siblings, just to take care of him so he could get a break, so he could be a little boy. First day he went in there, he was very hesitant. And then he looked at me and said, "You can go now." He spent 2 hours in there, came back. Next day he comes back to the hospital, looks at his sister, and he says, "Can I go now? Can I go to the sibling room?" And then we just let him go. And he spent another 2 hours in there. We were also told that there was a tutor there. "Oh, does he have homework? Because we're going to help him with that." There was a day when Petra needed her blood drawn, and after you have heart surgery, it's very difficult to find a vein to do a draw. And the whole floor knew it by her yelling, "I said please, I said stop it." And they had to get this blood drawn. And at that point, the social worker came in and very calmly said, "We're going to start counting, and we're going to count as high as you can." And she calmed her down. And this was just someone on the floor that they knew that could help us. I was spent. I didn't know what to do, so somebody stepped in where I couldn't. Petra came home 5 days after the surgery. 6 weeks later, she was back at school. 2 weeks after that, she resumed any normal activity a child could do at school. 6 months later, she was taken off all of her medication and was allowed to do any activity a 6-year-old girl could do. She could do gymnastics and dance and yoga and swimming. It's as if it never happened. And we have New York Presbyterian Hospital to thank for that. We have Dr. Q to thank for that.
Yes,
every
we
day.
do. You mean Quaggerbar.
Quaggerbar.